Hey, what's up? This is Sully from Godsmack. Strap on those boots, baby, because you are now in the trenches of the war room with the one and only Mistress Carrie right here on the Mistress Carrie podcast.
What's up? This is Joe Rogan, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Her hair so lovely, pretty eyes.
Hey, this is Brent from Shinedown, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie. Hey, Carrie, go put your bra on, girl.
Hey, this is Steven Tyler, and you be listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
What's up? This is Aaron from Stain, and you're listening to Mistress Carrie.
Hi, everybody. This is Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and you're listening to the one, the only Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is David from the band Disturbed, and you're listening to the baddest bitch in Boston, Mistress Carrie.
Hi, Bruce Dickinson here from Iron Maiden. Yes, indeed, Miss Whiplash herself, Mistress Carrie, is here to unchain your brain.
Hi, this is Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You're listening to Mistress Carrie.
This is Dennis Leary. You are listening to my favorite, Mistress Carrie.
Hey, this is Corey from Stone Sour, and you have the privilege of listening to Mistress Carrie. Oh, God. Oh, yeah.
Hey, it's Mistress Carrie, reporting for duty from MCHQ for episode 231 of the Mistress Carrie podcast. And before we get to this week's guest, Ginny Luke, I want to remind you about the Mistress Carrie Grunge Brunch happening at City Winery Boston on Saturday, November 16th. Rotten Apple, the premier Alice in Chains tribute band, will be bringing to life the Alice in Chains Unplugged set. Tickets are almost gone, and you can get the details on the concert calendar at mistresscarrie.com. My guest this week is electric violinist Ginny Luke, who just released her new album, Devil at My Heels, and adds it to her unbelievable resume that includes playing with artists like Meatloaf, Snoop, the Foo Fighters, Stevie Wonder, David Foster, and so many more. I sat down with Ginny to talk about her new album and her early start on the violin at the age of 3. Ginny and I talked about how she grew up in a veteran family, the uncharted territory of the electric violin, songwriting, and so much more. Ginny Luke is an absolute talent and a total badass, and I was so happy that I got her on the show. So allow me to introduce you to Ginny Luke. Hello, hello, hello.
Hi, are you Mistress Carrie?
I am, and I can hear you great. How are you?
I'm good. I love your hair.
Oh, thank you.
How's it going?
It's going really well. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
It's nice to meet you. I had never met you before, but when everybody sent me your music, I was like, there's so much going on. I didn't even know what to do. I was like, I got to talk to this girl because she has got a lot going on.
Lots of stuff. Thank you for taking a listen.
So there are so many artists right now, which I think is a really exciting thing about music in 2024, that genres are getting blended. And there are so many artists that are doing all of these different things, and you can't really put it in a box. And that would be how I would describe you and your music, that it's not just one thing.
Oh, it's just really me, vocally and with electric violin and on keyboards and all the styles I play. Yeah, it just naturally expressed itself in the last few years as a kind of a bad bitch rock, loud vocal, loud tone. And that's who I am and what it is right now.
I've made this joke on the show so many times that I imagine as a parent, there are 3 instruments you dread your kid wanting to tackle. Drums, the bagpipes, and the violin, because the learning curve is so painful.
It is. Oh my God. Yeah. They started me when I was 3 years old, though, so it's their fault. Yeah.
So this was not something you chose for yourself, or maybe it was at 3 years old.
No, I didn't choose the violin. All my brothers and I were started on piano plus another instrument, and we had to play until we were 18. My youngest brother, who's 9 years older than me, I have 3 brothers, he got to choose the cello. I didn't get to choose the violin, but I am very grateful my parents chose that, and I had amazing music education, and now I get to like actually live out kind of the rock star touring life, which is a blessing and a curse, but more of a blessing.
At least it's smaller than the cello.
Yeah, for sure. Easier to carry around.
My marching band, high school band musical career was cut short because I have no musical ability, but I chose the clarinet because it was so small compared to some of the bigger, like you look at the tuba guy and you're just like, oh man.
I know. I would never want to play tuba. I feel bad for tuba players, but I definitely still like the tuba. Yeah, violin is a cool, easy instrument, and also electric violin. I love that it's unique and no one can really tell me how to play it.
I've said to many people, because every once in a while I bump into a fellow clarinet player on the show.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered what it would sound like if people could find a way to electrify the clarinet.
Oh my God.
With effects pedals, the way you play the violin.
That'd be wild.
I thought it would be so cool, but I don't have the ability to try it myself. So I'm going to have to find a badass heavy metal clarinet player to try it for me.
Oh my God, that'd be amazing. I don't know how you'd find it, but sounds cool.
You answered one of my questions that I always ask about whether or not you grow up in a musical family. So it obviously is something that is important in your family because everyone plays instruments.
Yes, everyone in my immediate and extended family has played their whole lives.
Is it something that you think is environmental or do you think it's genetic? And I asked Wolfgang Van Halen this about whether or not musical ability is learned or given to you in your genes. What do you think it is?
I do think it's partly genetic. I also think it's how this is crazy, but how you're trained in the womb listening to music. I'm not even kidding. My mom was getting a master's degree in pipe organ when I was in her belly. I think that actually made me a smarter musician listening to Bach every day for 8 hours.
Wow. Like,
it's wild, right?
I mean, this is what happens when you grow up in your mom's belly and she listens to the Beatles all the time. So obviously the difference in you and I is the difference in our mom's music.
Well, if there was music, that's going to make you smarter anyway, because there's like a direct correlation between like IQ and reading ability and memorization and music exposure at a young age. So definitely it all helps, I think.
Your mom has a master's degree in the pipe organ.
She does.
That's a sentence I've never said out loud on this program before.
I know, it's so random. But there's a lot of crossover in like classical music and neoclassical rock. You know, I don't know if you know Yngwie Malmsteen's playing, but a lot of, and of course, Van Halen, like there's so many amazing guitar passages and iconic pieces that are like directly coming from classical music. So I think it's an easy crossover.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a guitarist like Steve Vai, or you look at a band like Tool, there's or Dream Theater, like there's so much going on, or Rush, that's not just a garage band.
Totally. Those musicians are such high-level musicians, and they're probably like well acquainted in all these styles too. That's what's so amazing with high-level musicians is they just want to make a record like this or put their expression in this context, you know? I just love studying the best musicians and especially guitar players.
Being someone that talks to musicians all the time, but not actually being one myself, I was really surprised to learn that a lot of these musicians that we're talking about, really high-level players, cannot write and read music.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That was such a shock to me when I joined Meatloaf's band, because I thought all high-level musicians knew what I knew, but I was naive. Like I was playing for these great artists at an early teenage age, you know, like my late teen years, like Snoop and J. Cole. And then with Meatloaf's band, I was like, oh, none of them read music. Like maybe Justin Avery, the keyboard player, did. But I was like, oh, so they relate to music a totally different way. Okay. And at first I was quiet but judgmental in my head for the first week, but I knew to keep my mouth shut. And then I started learning like the second week, oh my gosh, like Scott Ian from Anthrax, he memorizes music in a different way. And Paul Crook, the music director, engages with music in a different way. Okay, how do they memorize? How do they come up with parts? How does it stick? How do they? And so now I think I was exposed to such a broad way of engaging with music that I get to kind of like pick and choose now. And that's another reason why I like rock and blues a lot, because I feel like it's like more expressive from my heart, at least in this chapter of my life.
Somebody explained it to me that if you don't grow up learning the rules, then you're not as afraid to step out of them. And so for a player that gets handed an instrument and is not told, don't do it this way, that they're just like, okay, I'm just going to do what feels good. And so you don't learn what the rules are. So you don't know that you're technically breaking them.
Yeah. I think that this album is a direct rebellion of my upbringing. And instead of me like rebelling in college, it's like my mid 20s of writing the record and living kind of in a rebellious way. And you can hear it in the sound and the way I'm singing and the way I'm playing on the record. And I think it's because music and my lifestyle as a violinist was so told to me, given to me, like you should present yourself this way, is proper and beautiful, and adhere to the rules and the social constructs. You should be, you know, preppy or well-to-do or pleasing. And I just wanted to defy all of that for myself. And then as I was making this record, I realized, oh, this is going to be a cool example for women, that they can defy what the social constructs have told us and culture has told us we are supposed to be.
For a violinist, when I was doing some reading about you, you have one of the most diverse group of artists that you've worked with. You already mentioned Meatloaf, but you've worked with artists like the Foo Fighters and Snoop, who you mentioned, the Dave Matthews Band, Stevie Wonder, David freaking Foster.
Amazing. Yeah. High level musicians. Again, I always try to just approach the music as the work. What are we doing? What are we recording? What are we performing? How do I honor their vision? What's the style of music we're doing? What's appropriate to the style? And then, like later in my career, through my 20s, I've developed my own sound, which is exciting. So you can hear my violin tone, like on Hosier's record. You can hear me on AJR, like, you know, it's me, which I'm stoked that kind of happened naturally. But that really happened from studying guitar players again, because I knew, like, oh, that's Van Halen. Oh, that's Slash. Oh, that's Jimi Hendrix. Well, I want to be like that on violin. I want people to know it's me. And then vocally, that's happened naturally too. But yeah, as far as like the high level artists I play for, I always go in professionally of what does the music need? What am I called to do on it? How can I best support the artist? But now I'm stoked with this record because it's my turn to have the expression.
I talk to a lot of guitar players, and I always ask, how did you know you were getting good at it? Like, what was the first riff that you mastered that was like your favorite song or something? How did you know you were actually getting good at it? And so many of them have said, when it stops hurting. When you've played so much that you've built up the calluses that it doesn't hurt anymore. Is the same for the violin?
Wow. I don't think so. I think that's really scary. It sounds like they adjusted their technique to be comfortable by that point. But with violin, it's really important not to hurt and to be aware of tension. Although, again, the 1800s style of playing the classical violin, which is the most efficient way to get around the instrument, does tend to hurt the shoulder and the wrist. So we're always fighting against that. And when I realized that other styles like fiddle or electric, no one can tell me how to play electric, allow me to be free and loose, that actually was much better for my playing and my safety. So I think for violin, it's a little different because I think it's really important to be relaxed in the body and loose. And I know I do get calluses, Yeah, those hurt a little bit, but but other than that, I think it's important to be free and relaxed.
When I was doing some reading, there was a point in your early childhood that you were overseas on an army base. Does that mean you come from a military family?
Yeah, wow, you dug deep. Yeah, I was in I was in Vilseck, Germany, with my family, and that's where I started violin and piano at age 3.
I bring it up because there is a disproportionate amount of rock stars that come from veteran families. And since I'm married to an active duty Marine and I come from a veteran family, it's something that every time I bump into it, I am more and more amazed all the time. And I wonder, is it something with the upbringing and the structure that teaches you what's required to get really good at something, even if that something is being a rock star, which is like as far from being in the military as you can get when it comes to lifestyle?
That's such a good point. And yes, I totally think the military upbringing shaped how I run my career and my persistence, my ability to play or practice 8 hours a day when needed. And for example, I got up at 4 a.m. today to run my business, but I also love to party and I love to let loose. So I have these two sides of me. And yeah, I do think the military upbringing, got my skills up and put me in a mindset of achieving no matter what.
Well, that sounds like every military person I know. Up early to be organized and meticulous, but probably hungover because they were partying the night before. That's literally every person I know in the military, including my husband.
That sounds about right. Yeah. Same.
When you're coming up as a young woman, playing a non-traditional instrument for the type of music you make, because it's not strange that a woman would play the violin, but it is strange that a woman would play the electric violin and be making rock and pop music. How many times did you get told no? And how did you persevere through that? Because I can't imagine getting to where you are and working with the people you've worked with that everybody just was like, oh yeah, sure, let me open that door for you and walk right in.
Right. How many times was I told no? I got used to hearing no in my teen years, moving to LA from Iowa. So that was a big adjustment. And then as far as the music industry, I had a record deal before this deal that fell through on no fault of my own, and lots of different managers that either said no or didn't work out. And I try to keep my relationships very respectful and long-term. Like if I work with someone, I want to work with them, hopefully on a good basis forever if it works out. But yeah, the no's, I think they drove me forward. But the music industry is the most fickle, I think, of most industries. It's a very hard industry to be in and sustain a long career. It's easy to get burnt out and it's easy to get met with no and then to want to give up. But again, I think it's because I've been in music since I was 3 years old that I'm like, there's no way I'm giving up. There is no giving up. I've been doing this since I was 3. So it's happening.
Coming from the classical, more structured background that you came up in, what did you think when Gojira took over the opening ceremony of the Olympics? Because for non-opera lovers that were just lovers of metal, I was like, oh my God, heavy music is finally getting its due. What was your perspective?
I thought it was amazing. I agree. And I just think artists should be allowed to express the way they want to express. I get very frustrated when the classical community is so judgmental. And I get frustrated when these communities judge each other. I don't understand why we have to be so judgmental and isolated apart from each other. So I was stoked. I really love when other styles of music are introduced to communities that might not be familiar with them.
Well, there are so many examples in rock working with, symphonies, Metallica, Aerosmith. I just talked to Sendog last week from Cypress Hill, and they just played with the London Symphony Orchestra at Royal Albert Hall.
Yeah, cool.
And did the Cypress Hill tunes with stand-up bass and a full orchestra. And it seems like just watching the footage that the orchestra was so into it. So I feel like that stuffiness might be starting to go away.
Yeah. I feel like it's going away more in Europe more than America. I was just in France this past week, and I was recording with an artist, and it was a amalgamation of styles. And then the month before this past month, I was in Amsterdam recording at like 12 different studios. And I feel like people are starting to be more open-minded there. But also, I notice in these arts cities like Berlin, Amsterdam, London, people are exposed to music at an earlier age. Like, it's more common. There's like symphony halls, there's churches, there's like community groups. In America, we're getting our arts programs cut, and children aren't exposed anymore. They're not included in these like musical community events. So I think, yes, I do think in our world, maybe in Europe and hopefully other parts of the world are more open-minded. I would love to see America open that door for young musicians.
I always ask musicians, I have a theory about your musical identity, that there's the music you get exposed to. For you, the pipe organ in the womb, the unwilling music that is the soundtrack to your childhood. And then somewhere along the line, you hear something that you decide you like, and your musical identity is different. So because you grew up so immersed in music, do you remember what it was where you finally made a decision and were like, I like this even if nobody else in the house does?
Ooh. Yeah. I think my brother, who played cello and bass, kind of exposed me first, especially to Red Hot Chili Peppers and Metallica and Ozzy Osbourne and a bunch of bands, Led Zeppelin. But Red Hot Chili Peppers was the band that I started playing when I was like 12 on the living room stereo. And my parents would be like, turn that off. I think they just did not like the electric guitar. I think they honestly just like their classical preference, just it represented something rebellious and uncontrollable to them. Like, I don't know if it was like the 70s, something about the guitar and like a drum kit made them very upset. And to me, I was like, oh my God, I feel like I fit in this music so well. And I was finding my identity in it, from like 12 to 15 and 16. And then when I moved to LA, I really embraced Chili Peppers more because they have, so many songs about California. So it was like very kind of stamp on my life path.
Not a surprise that your brother that plays the bass was such a huge fan of the Chili Peppers.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And then I got to meet Flea later at Composer's Breakfast, and that was like amazing,
I interviewed him once, and I remember sitting there. First of all, we were in the locker room of the Boston Celtics, and as a Lakers fan, I had to deal with that from him.
Yeah.
But he strikes me as someone, I think Perry Farrell is kind of the same way. There are certain people that I feel like just see the world differently than everyone else. That the world just looks through their eyes, and it is just not the same world that most people see.
Yeah. Really unique perspective. I see that with Flea. Yeah.
Yeah, just total, not even acknowledging barriers and rules. That they just don't even see them because they just are looking at the world so differently.
Oh, that's so cool. That's what I want for marginalized people and misunderstood people to feel, especially young female musicians. I want them to not feel like there's barriers.
Well, now is such, that's just one of the reasons why I was excited to talk to you. Having been in the rock world since I started my career in the 90s, women's roles in rock and metal have completely changed throughout the course of my career. And I feel like this is a time now where women like me that are a little older, I hate to say it that way, but it's freaking true. We've been waiting for this. Like, this is the time we've been waiting for, where, you know, you being a heavy metal violinist is how you get described before you're a female heavy metal violinist.
Oh my God, I'm so glad to hear that. I didn't know I was not being described as a female musician. That's a relief.
I mean, it still is going to come up. It's like saying, oh, you know, a female DJ for me or whatever. But I feel like it is not the novelty it would have been a decade or two ago.
Totally. Yeah. I know we've been waiting for this time. I've been studying this in the last like 8 years of interviews from Lizzie Hale and Amy Lee and St. Vincent. Like, all of them have spoken, but in a very small amounts, because I think a lot of us have been nervous to speak freely about this. That women are underrepresented in rock and in the music industry in general. But now it's coming out, and like, it's exciting. Like, more women can make music and be heard. There's more playlists too of like fierce bad bitch rock. Like, you know?
Well, you can go back and listen to because I've known Lizzie and Amy for decades. We have no problem bringing this topic up on this show.
Awesome. I'm going to go back and listen to all those interviews for sure. Sometimes I just need to hear those interviews to go to a meeting or like go to a session, because some days it takes a lot of chutzpah just to keep going, you know?
Well,
so
that's why I asked you about the nose.
Totally. I think it's so important for female leaders in rock and in the music industry in general to just share their experiences and speak about what we should be striving for in the industry. We still should be striving for equal pay of male musicians to female, male artists to female. I mean, that's just still not happening all the time yet, but I will be advocating and hopefully paving the way for more female musicians and for all people. All people should feel like compensated equally. I think that's a musician thing in general.
There are two completely separate skill sets from the cheap seats where I'm sitting. Being a proficient instrumentalist and player and being a songwriter, to me, are two totally different things.
Yeah.
Growing up being a player, when did you realize you could write?
Yeah, great question. I loved studying songs starting at age 4 and 5. And then when I was 7, I gave, my first notebook attempts at some bad songwriting. And then at 12, I was like, no, I actually really want to write good songs. And I started studying interviews and anything I could to get better at songwriting. And then by age 14, I flew to LA to do my first single. And that's when I started writing with songwriters in LA and going to songwriting conventions. And I was lucky to go to like music festivals and like sit and watch Ryan Tedder talk about good songwriting when I was like 15. So early teen years, I wanted to be a great songwriter as well. And then the instrumental aspect, that was part of the family rule. So that was going to happen either way. But I think my family also, they didn't really consider songwriting as legit as composing. So that was a funny barrier I had to get over too. It was just like, no, great songwriting touches millions of people around the world. That's what I want to do. I want to write songs that help people find strength in themselves and help them understand themselves.
I ask every songwriter that comes on the show, is there an example, and the genre, the era, the artist, that is inconsequential. But if you looked up the definition of perfect songwriting, what song do you think is perfectly crafted?
That's a very heavy question. What is a perfect song? Okay, this one is instrumental based, but it's a great song that has touched millions. Purple Rain, Prince. I think I say that because it leads so many people to transcendence. And I think when you can do that in a song, it's lift people, even if they've heard the song over and over and over, they find new meaning in it. I think that makes the best song.
Well, Ginny, I'm so excited that you came on the show. I was so excited to talk to you, and I cannot wait to see you out on the road because I want to experience your show in person. I've watched your videos, but I'm like, no. I need to see this live.
Yes, I would love to meet you in person, and thank you, because I think my stage persona is a little bit more rebellious than my interview vibe.
Do you have plans? Is there anything you can tell us concrete for like next year about what your plans are?
I am working with my management team on a tour to promote this album. Right now, I am performing the release in LA this Friday. Tonight, I'm performing my songs and then joining Nuno Betancourt, guitarist, in Hollywood. So that's really exciting. Then I'll also be performing the album in Vegas, New York, and Minneapolis.
Well, tonight when you go to the show, give Nuno a giant hug for me because we have been friends for decades.
Oh.
And he is one of the examples when I asked the question about being able to read music or not. He was one of the first guitarists that when he told me he couldn't read music, I was shocked by because he's so proficient as a player.
Yeah.
So when you see him tonight, tell him that you were just talking to Mistress Carrie and he'll just go, "Oh boy, you two together."
I will. That's awesome.
He's a proud Boston guy, so.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. Well, it was so good to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Carrie. Appreciate it.
Congratulations on the new album. We'll see you soon.
Thank you so much. Awesome.
There she is, Ginny Luke. You can check out her new album, Devil at My Heels, on this episode's corresponding playlist that's linked in the show notes. I make a playlist for every full-length episode of the Mistress Carrie podcast that features my guest music and all the artists and songs that we referenced in the interview. You'll also find all of Ginny's links and all the Mistress Carrie links. And if you liked what you heard, don't forget to like, follow, and share the Mistress Carrie podcast. New full-length episodes come out every Wednesday. Plus, every weekday, you get the Sit Rep. The Situation Report breaks down all of your rock news, music headlines, and entertainment updates to about 5 minutes. And you never know when we're going to release a bonus episode, like we did late last week with Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses. You can join me live every Tuesday night at 8:30 Eastern for my weekly streaming video show, Cocktails in the War Room. You can find it on Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, and YouTube. And of course, you can always find me on the radio. Get the details on all of that and more at mistresscarrie.com. And don't forget about the Mistress Carrie Grunge Brunch, Saturday, November 16th at City Winery, Boston with Rotten Apple. The Mistress Carrie Podcast, a proud member of the Pantheon Podcast Network.